How are we doing there, boys and girls? Mantheus here, and welcome back to another video. So today I've got a slightly longer, slightly more discussion-based topical video for you guys of trying to answer the question that you see 1,000 times and is frustrated at least each and every one of you at least once. We're talking about, well, why is this fella on the auction house, or why is this other goblin able to, or why are they selling their crafted items for less than material price? It's something that gets really frustrating the more often you see it, and I wanted to just sort of talk about it a little bit today. There's a few reasons, right? I came up with sort of 3 reasons why this is happening. There's 3 major reasons. There's one like kind of little bonus reason that we'll touch on, but there's 3 main real reasons to why this happens. Firstly, we've all heard it before. They farmed them so they're free. This is really frustrating, right? It's a really big misconception and it's an easy mistake to make, but a lot of people consider that the fact that they farmed their materials, it means that because they didn't actually cost them anything in terms of actual gold, they consider those materials free. And so when they craft the items, they just list the crafted item on the auction house and they're happy, right? They're of the opinion that, well, if they make 30,000 gold selling a bunch of potions, or they make 50,000 gold selling a bunch of potions, they farmed their potions and so they're still richer than what they were to begin with, and people tend to not value their time all that efficiently in game, certainly not anywhere like they would do sort of if, you know, were being paid to do a job per se. But yeah, that's kind of annoying, but that is one of the big reasons that people consider their materials free, and so yeah, they undercut you. What we will do after we've sort of bullet pointed out some of the main reasons that I see why this happens is I will give you some hot tips on exactly how you can deal with this, because there are some definite, there's some very easy things you can do, then there's some slightly more advanced things you can do, but it is almost always very easy to combat. So what else could be the reason? Well, apart from just, you know, farming the materials so they're free, there's the God's honest truth, and the reason that people tend not to like to hear of that they are just getting their materials cheaper than you. This usually tends to be the response that if you give to somebody that asks this question, they'll jump back down your throat with like disagreement. So well, no, they can't be getting their materials cheaper. I get my materials at the cheapest price. And yeah, that's a scenario where you'll have to take a step back and say, I agree to disagree. But the God's honest truth is there are many ways to get your materials considerably cheaper than the rest of your competition, which most people don't realise, nor do people do. But that will be understandable a lot more when we talk about how we can actually deal with this. So we've got the first reason that, well, I farm the materials so they're free. We've got the second reason that these people are selling their crafted items cheaper, of that they do actually just get their materials cheaper than you. And the third reason is kind of a slightly awkward one, and it's one that's more frustrating to deal with, but it's often a case that these people actually know what they're doing. They're almost happy to sell under cost. Now that is going to infuriate people almost more than option number 2, but it is actually a very valid reason. More often than not, these people do know what they're doing and they're aware of their crafting costs, and they're aware of how much they're selling them for, and it's very strategical to why they do it. It's one of the more difficult ones to combat. You could then ask another question, well, to why are they doing that? And it's often because it helps them control the market, and it also is often because they're actually making more gold selling something else somewhere else, so they're actually still winning overall. I did say at the beginning there's one sort of like sneaky bonus reason why this is possibly happening. There is a category of people out there, right, that just want to see the world burn. There's definitely a category of people that just don't care. They're not bothered. Think of it from the point of view of that some people do mythic raiding for the gear. Some people do mythic raiding because they like to kill bosses. People do things in this game for different reasons. If you tend to enjoy crafting items, and you enjoy selling things on the auction house, and you enjoy coming back the next day and opening your mailbox and enjoy looting 1,000,000 gold out of your mailbox, you might not necessarily actually care if it cost you more than 1,000,000 to put that gold there in the first place. There are just some people that maybe have tens of millions of gold and genuinely just don't care. But that's a real sort of very, very, very niche market. But let's talk about then now how we actually deal with these people. So the first one's really easy, right? The first people who think that their materials are free, and so because their materials were free, they can sell the product for whatever they want. These guys are super easy to combat. The issue comes is when you get multiple of them all at the same time. It gets a little bit more difficult to deal with. But at least on the medium sort of population realms, you can combat this very, very quickly. Simply by asking yourself a real easy question. How many hours in the day does that guy have to go out there farming? How many hours in the day is he dedicating to making those items and to then sell them quote unquote cheap? That one guy is never going to be able to supply the entire server with what that server needs. So let's talk about like flasks, for example. That one guy may be able to go out and do a whole bunch of herbalism, make a whole bunch of flasks, throw them on the auction house really cheap, but guess what happens? When they sell, it's going to be a really long ass time before he can go out and farm enough herbs to do the same thing again. These guys, you just got to bite the bullet and you just got to buy them out. One thing I will say before we get too deep into how you deal with these sort of situations is that the biggest problem you have as a goblin when you see this happening is that you don't actually know what type of player you're dealing with. You just kind of have to throw some guesswork at it. So you've always got to be kind of careful when it comes to buying these people out, because you don't know if they're a mega goblin and just want to see the world burn, or they're a goblin that farmed them so they consider it free. You never know this 100%. I mean, whisper them, ask them. You never know, they might just tell you. Who knows? But the reality of it is you've always got to be slightly careful. But if you see somebody only posting like a handful of potions or a handful of flasks and they've deep undercut, the likelihood is that they farmed them, they considered them free, they're just posting them to sell them, because to them it's still a win, even if they win slightly less. Buy them out if you wish, or I mean, you could even whitelist them. If you're using Trade Skill Master, just whitelist them. It means that you won't undercut their auctions. Let theirs sell out first, you'll then undercut under the next one, and you're good to go, right? We understand that they can't supply the entire market. They're not in it for the long game, they just want to make a quick buck. Let them do their thing and move on. Like I said, it becomes slightly more difficult when you get a whole cluster of those. If your market is being sort of dominated by farmers, it does get slightly difficult, and of course this is one of the biggest reasons why bots are an issue in the game, but that's a topic for a different conversation. Let's look at option 2 then. They do get their materials cheaper. This is the one that people tend not to like to hear, but it is also counteractable. The God's honest and easiest way to counteract these people is to work out how they're getting their materials cheaper and do a better job. Let's be honest here, the people that put in most effort tend to come out the best. Look at PvP, for example. If you stroll into an arena and you've not gemmed, you've not enchanted, and then somebody comes in and dumpsters you, whose fault is that? Is it his fault because he had better gear and enchanted his gear and put gems in his gear? And is that his fault, or is it your fault because you went into the arena unprepared? The auction house is kind of the same. I hate to say it, but there are many players very much like myself whose their primary focus is making gold in the game, and they will take every step that they can to win. And if you're not willing to take as many steps as they do, you're almost not actually... You kind of don't deserve to make the gold anyway. But what can we do? What are without just dumpstering you, let's give you a few hints and tips in how you can actually go about getting your materials cheaper. Well, yesterday, the very last video on the channel, I did a video on the channel about how to use the Undermine journal. The underminejournal.com is a gold maker's best friend. It's a website that tracks the prices of every single item and every single crafted item in the game, and it gives you some great information about when materials are at what price. You can jump on the Undermine Journal, you can check out the the past week of sales on your auction house, and you can see, right, at this point in time, I can actually get my materials for 10, 15, 20% cheaper than I thought I could. And this is often the misconception with people. A lot of people will go to the auction house and they will look at the price of herbs, and if the total herbs cost 100 gold and the potion is selling for 95 gold, then they say it's not profitable. But what about that goblin that bought his herbs 3 days ago and only paid 50 gold for his herbs? He's still making a win and he's making you look like a fool. So you got to do that little bit of extra work. You got to go that extra mile to make sure. I'm not even talking about cancel scanning more. I'm not even talking about like relisting more aggressively. I'm not even talking about having a better TSM setup. I'm simply going right back to basics and saying, do everything you can to get your herbs at the cheapest price and you will win. So that's one of the best things you can do to combat the they got the materials cheaper. Let's look at option number 3 then. They know what they're doing and they're happy to sell below cost. This is really difficult to counteract, and this is usually because who you're dealing with probably has a lot more gold than you. And I know this is going to be really frustrating for anybody trying to make gold, and certainly for those trying to start out making gold, but this is often a roadblock that you come across. There are people out there, people who have lots of gold available and will just throw it about, and they're playing in 10 to 15 different markets. They're probably crafting potions, they're probably crafting flasks, they're probably crafting enchants, they're probably selling gems, they're probably selling base legendary items, the list goes on. They're selling a little bit of everything, which basically means that if they have to sell under cost in one area, they're not bothered. They're actually more interested in just selling those items to get their gold back to generate turnover than they are with actually micromanaging that one specific market. You see this all too often with things like the base legendary items. And I'll talk about base legendaries a little bit because it's a market that is my absolute go-to market. But the base legendary items, you see this a lot. For example, you'll see somebody, they'll focus, very narrow focus on one specific slot. I don't know, take Umbra hide legs for example. If you're a leather worker, they focus on crafting the Umbra hide legs. They buy their materials, they try to buy their materials cheap, they craft their items, but they go to the auction house and they see that the Umbra hide legs that they've just crafted are being sold for less than cost, and they get mad and they rage quit. The reality is that same leather worker that's selling the Umbra hide legs at less than cost is probably also crafting and selling every other single legendary item, and if they take a small loss on that one, they don't care. They're actually more interested in frustrating you and kicking you out the market. This is a real thing with the bigger goblins. I know I fall into this category myself. I craft every single legendary and I'm very aggressive on my pricing, and I know I make it deliberately hard for other people on my server to get into that market because, you know, you want to deal with your competition. I enjoy making gold because it means I get freedom in the game. I assume you probably want the same. So those kind of goblins, they're really difficult to deal with. They're obviously quite aware of what they're doing. They don't really mind too much about what they're doing. The best way to deal with that is to diversify, and this kind of comes back to basically act how they are acting. They're not selling just one item, they're not just crafting one item, they're focusing on multiple things. And so if I was to summarize everything here that we've gone over today, there are two main things that you really want to do. You absolutely want to diversify what it is you're selling. If you're only focusing on potions, if you're only focusing on flasks, you want to spread yourself out a little bit. Alchemy can do a bunch of stuff. You can have 2 professions per character. If you're dealing with alchemy, then maybe use inscription at the same time. It uses the same base materials, they pair up nicely, but it gives you a lot more things to try and sell. And the second thing, try a little bit harder. The people that try harder to make more gold, tend to win. If you're looking for that quick buck, if you're looking for the easy win, it tends not to come very often. At the start of an expansion, you can quite often find those easy wins, but when it comes to crafting and we're mid expansion and as time goes on, it gets a little bit more and more competitive. And so God's honest truth, you just got to try a little bit harder. Go that extra mile. If you can go that extra mile, trust me, it will pay off in the long term. But there we go, boys and girls. I hope that will help you. I hope that will sort of maybe, if not put your mind at ease too much, but give you some hints and tips on maybe how to deal with the competition on your auction house. If you like this style of video, boys and girls, remember to hit the like button. Leave your comments down below on any other tips and tactics that you would use on your realm, or maybe if I missed anything, let me know in the comments down below. But I'll leave it there for now. Enjoy the rest of your day, boys and girls. Happy gold making, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.